The new year did not start peacefully in Manipur, but then anyone who was expecting them was probably living in a fool's paradise. But barely 48 hours into the new year, a bombshell dropped. No, not a real bomb. The news that the free movement regime, one of the cornerstones of the Act East policy, would be scrapped because one chief minister is angry and that the border of India and Myanmar would also be fenced. Wow, talk about starting the new year in the most controversial manner. But wait, what is so controversial about scrapping the FMR? I mean, if there is one thing we have learned from Manipur violence, it is that the Myanmar side of the border is causing all the violence and terrorists are coming in huge numbers, right? I mean, everyone from Amit Shah to Biren Singh have in as many words said that Manipur violence would have not happened without the Myanmar factor, right? So it is only fair that FMR ends and border fencing begins, right? Patience. Friends and countrymen, patience. We are here to cut the clutter, remove the noise and try our best to explain why this may not be as simple as it sounds. Pursuing for months.
The village of Assam.
In the 75th Independence Day.
"10 years is a long time, right? Or maybe it is not. But anyway, in the second half of 2014, the Look East policy, which had been in place since the early 90s, was upgraded to Act East policy, which focuses on the extended neighbourhood in the Asia-Pacific region. The policy, which was originally conceived as an economic initiative, has gained political, strategic and cultural dimensions, including establishment of institutional mechanisms for dialogue and cooperation. The key principles and objectives of Act East policy is to promote economic cooperation, cultural ties and develop strategic relationships with countries in the Asia-Pacific region through continuous engagement at bilateral, regional and multilateral levels, thereby providing enhanced connectivity to the states of northeastern region with other countries in our neighbourhood. And before someone accuses me of making this up, wait. This was the response of retired General Dr. V.K. Singh, and the questions were asked by Dr. Thokcham Mainya, a former Lok Sabha member from Manipur. Singh also said the various plans at bilateral and regional levels include steady efforts to develop and strengthen connectivity of Northeast with the ASEAN region through trade, culture, people-to-people contacts and physical infrastructure such as road, transport, telecommunication, power, etc. Some of the major projects include Kaladan Multimodal Transit Transport Project, the India-Myanmar-Thailand Trilateral Highway Project, Reetidim Road Project, Border Hearts, etc. And just to remind you, none of the aforementioned projects can work out without the Northeast. India shares a 1,643 km long border across 4 states, namely Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Manipur and Mizoram, with Myanmar's Kachin Sagaing region and Chin state. It runs from the tri-point with China in the north to the tri-point with Bangladesh in the south, which brings us to the free movement regime. Under the FMR, agreed upon and implemented by both the India and Myanmar governments, it allows people living in the villages along the border to go 16 kilometers into each other's territory without any documents or IDs. Scrapping FMR would mean visas would now be required for border movement. Formulated in 2016 by this very BJP government, the FMR can be seen as both a norm or an exception. If you look at our borders with, say, Nepal and Bhutan, one could argue that the free movement regime has existed in some form or the other on these borders. And then there are the borders with China and Pakistan. Nothing is free, there is hardly any movement and the regime does not exist. So which way should the India-Myanmar border head? The Pakistan-China way or the Bhutan-Nepal way? Now, let me get one thing straight. We are not here to belittle the sufferings of Manipur people. But the violence in Manipur has been going on since when? May? What has the government done? Nothing. Our PM does not even want to talk about Manipur. The Delhi media is now bored of talking about the state. Imphal-based leaders have pretty much given up about governance in the Kuki regions, and the only time we hear of government involvement is when fighting takes place. And I'm sorry, but if you are a Meitei, can you honestly say that N. Biren Singh has done his job? Have you forgotten what the Biren Singh government did in Imphal, shooting at youth? Biren Singh is not a new chief minister and he is certainly not a new leader. Now he may act like his true saffron BJP, but he was a proud Congress leader once. People forget that when Biren Singh says things like mercenaries from Myanmar are the reason behind violence in Manipur, he only implies that the border security forces are not doing their job. He is also indicating that there is no anger among Manipur residents. So the ones who protested on May 3 were Myanmar residents, the people whose homes got burnt in Imphal were mercenaries, the people who lost everything and had to take shelter in relief camps are refugees, not citizens. The Thanlol MLA, who was beaten to an inch of his life, is not equal. And if a few mercenaries can overwhelm the Manipur government, the state police force, the central security forces, everyone, then what does it say about us as a country which claims to be an emerging superpower? Drugs? Check. Smuggling of weapons? Check. Illegal counterfeit cigarettes? Check. Animal trade? Check. Yes, all of this happens via the India-Myanmar border, and as someone working full-time in the northeast, we are more than familiar with drugs and arms seizures from Arunachal to Myanmar. But wait a second. Are we saying that these things were not happening via the Myanmar border when the FMR was implemented? And if Manipur is the reason that we have to reconsider FMR, then what about other states? Remember much from February 2023? I do. It was the heightened excitement of three states heading to elections, Meghalaya, Nagaland and Tripura. While Tripura went to polls on February 16, Meghalaya and Nagaland did so on February 27. Amid all the election coverage, we at EastMojo published a story that was well received then, but over the past few days, we have revisited the story in light of the recent developments. Why? Even though the story was from Nagaland and that too Eastern Nagaland, it was for once not about elections or frontier Nagaland. Rather, it was about how Nagas from the India side of the border rushed to help Nagas on the Myanmar side when a fire destroyed 70 houses and a morung. The village under the Lahe township in the Naga self-administrated zone of Myanmar has about 200 homes and is inhabited by Khyamnigan Nagas, a trans-border Naga community settled on the contiguous hills of India and Myanmar. Now, this was a case of Nagas helping out each other across borders, but this may not have been possible if, say, the authorities at the border had insisted on getting proper documents, visas and whatnot. If anything, this was a perfect example of how the FMR or the free movement regime, which allowed residents on either side of the India-Myanmar border to travel 16 kilometers into each other's territory without a visa, was both necessary and valuable. The Nagaland-Myanmar border region is so backward, it makes Kohima look like London or New York. Do not believe us? Watch our documentary on Frontier Nagaland. In far-off border villages, the border regions turn into mini economies. FMR allows, despite all the issues, at least a market that exists beyond your village. Why should local interactions in one place end, that too among brothers? Myanmar has had a coup for 3 years, yet you will struggle to find any stories on people taking refuge in Nagaland. Why? Simple. That side of the border has been calm in part because it is the Naga self-administered zone of Myanmar. Naga zone in Myanmar, just there is a Nagaland in India, united as brothers, separated by borders. Sounds familiar? This is precisely why Joel Naga from the Rising People's Party came out vehemently against the scrapping of the FMR and said the Northeast must not pay for Biren Singh's mistakes.
In fact, the Nagaland government has, identified three border areas. One is Longwa, one is Avangku, and I think one is Pangsha, where trade can be carried out with Burma. So we have 1 million Naga people living in Myanmar, Burma. So if there's a border fencing, this is going to be affected. Obviously, families are going to be torn apart permanently. So when we talk about the Naga areas in Burma, we have to understand that there are 1 million Nagas in Burma. There's a Naga self-administered zone in Burma. And below that, there's a Somra area inhabited by Tangkhul Nagas, bordering Okru. So along the whole stretch of Manipur and Nagaland border till Mizoram. And below the Somnath track is the Chin area. So the Chins are closely related with the Mizos. So the whole area from Nagaland to Manipur to Mizoram is, inhabited by these independent tribes. Rather in the British days they were called independent tribes because the Burmese king of Ava had no control over these areas. And if you understand, during the British times, the eastern Nagaland, that is this side of the border, Patkai Range. Even the British had no control over these areas, and they were called as the free Nagas. So since time immemorial, there has been there have been the Naga tribes in Burma and India. They have been living together. They have been commingling together, and then they have been carrying out trade with each other. Now, this, as I stated before, this was formalized through FMR in 2016, as you put it. I thought it was 2018. Anyway, so now why should the Modi government backtrack? This is a question which I want to ask the Indian government. Why should they backtrack? Because Biren Singh said so. No, this is not acceptable.
Then there is Mizoram. Yes, Mizoram has thousands of refugees. But how do you know the number? Because they have documented. Have you seen any protests in Mizoram against rampant illegal immigration from Myanmar? If anything, we have seen a huge outpouring of support for refugees, and even today it continues. Like Jolnaga, Zoro too has spoken against such a move, and here is what their representative had to say.
We are all living together, especially as a Zoro ethnic community in India, in Myanmar and in Bangladesh. So we are forced by the British rule that we are divided, and we have the same culture, we have the same history, we have the same tradition, we have the same religion and social practices. Everything is the same. So we cannot be divided. If we are divided, we'll be like, Palestinian people divided in Israel and Palestinian. And Berlin Wall is already broken. So the moment the Berlin Wall is broken, economic prosperity is happening. So also it will hamper our economic life, our cultural life, everything. For example, we cannot visit our relatives in times of joy, in times of bereavement and funeral, etc. So we are strongly opposed because this idea will not help the community. In fact, it will hamper.
Fence the entire boundary, another border, another fencing. How long have we been fencing the India-Bangladesh border? Last we read, the fencing was hindered because of this. Have you visited the Myanmar-Mizoram, Myanmar-Manipur and the Myanmar-Nagaland borders? Endless hills, uneven terrain. We are going to fence all of that and do it well? Okay, if you say so. And all the problems that N. Biren Singh has mentioned, what happens to those while we build the fence? Shoot at sight orders at the borders? Okay, but wait, I thought it was Act East. The border separates families, clans, tribes, people who have the right to meet, interact, marry each other and live together while respecting international laws. And I'm not just saying this because I feel so. The call to end FMR and turn these places into no-pass kind of border contradicts the Article 36 of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples 2007, a declaration to which India is a signatory. As a signatory to the UNDRIP and asserting itself as a world power, India has to find alternatives to address border-related issues without resorting to measures like abolishing the free movement regime and implementing border fencing. And let us not forget, the border is not just for people moving around pointlessly. It is also a crucial trade route. India is the 11th largest foreign investor in Myanmar, with a total investment of $1.736 billion between April 2000 and March 2023. Total merchandise trade between India and Myanmar has reached $1.76 billion in 2022-2023 on the back of rising imports from Myanmar. The Kaladan multimodal project alone is worth $500 million. And despite the coup, India has maintained ties with Myanmar and our ministers have visited Myanmar on official visits too. The end of FMR would mean that we are regressing on an agreement we signed only 5 years ago. And before I sign out, I remind our viewers again, this is not official yet. But if it does become official, it will once again show us that when it comes to our relationship with the neighbors, long-term planning seems almost impossible. And that can never be good for the Northeast.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to EastMojo. For any queries, put them down in the comments section below and press on the bell icon for notifications.